Hey guys, today I want to ask the question, did Jesus claim to be God? I'm going to argue in the affirmative and then discuss two objections to my position. So here we go.
Sometimes you will hear people say that Jesus never claimed to be God in the Bible. Now, it's true that we do not have any explicit verse of the Bible where Jesus says, "I am God," but he does communicate the same idea in other kinds of ways. The most explicit examples are in the book of John, so we'll start there. In John 10, Jesus says, "The Father and I are one." Now, at face value, that's a strong claim. He doesn't say we are like one, he says we are one. Then it says that his listeners tried to kill him. They accused Jesus for making himself equal with God. Now his life is in danger, but he does not deny their accusation. John 5, Jesus claims that his work is the work of God the Father. This may not sound like a direct claim to God, but look at how his critics responded. For this reason they tried all the more to kill him. Not only was he breaking the Sabbath, but he was even calling God his own Father, making himself equal with God. John 14, Philip asks Jesus to show him the Father. Jesus says, "Anyone who has seen me has seen the Father." He goes on, "Do you not believe that I am in the Father and the Father is in me?" And so he's putting himself on that same level. Jesus is equating himself with God the Father. Essentially, it's like Philip saying, "Show me God," and Jesus says, "Who do you think I am?" Our next example needs a little bit of context. In Exodus 3, God is speaking directly to Moses. Moses says to God, "What is your name?" God says, "I am." It's an odd response, but it is memorable. Fast forward to John 8. Jesus is talking about his relationship to Abraham, a Jewish forefather who lived hundreds of years earlier. His accusers are baffled that Jesus is talking as if he knew the guy personally. So they say to Jesus, "You are not even 50 years old." But then Jesus says, "Well, actually, before Abraham was, I am." Immediately they tried to kill him. Again. So far, I've been using the book of John, and I think John is a good source to use, as do many other biblical scholars. Some would disagree, but even if we don't use John, we can still see Jesus making all these subtle claims to God in the other books.
Consider the following. In Matthew 9:12-13, Jesus quoted God from the Old Testament, making himself as the one who spoke those words. In Matthew 23:34, Jesus said, "I send you prophets." So he is the one who gives prophets to the nation of Israel. That's remarkable because when you read the Old Testament, God is always the one who sends prophets. Jesus taught from the Old Testament that you must worship God alone, yet he allowed himself to be worshipped. Whenever Jesus is accused of claiming to be God, he never denies the accusation. Sometimes he actually confirms it. Jesus frequently assumed the role of something only God could do. So Matthew 28:18, Jesus claimed to possess all authority in heaven and on earth. 2 verses later, Jesus says that he will be with his disciples forever. You put that together, you have all powerful, all present, and eternal. Jesus refers to himself as the Son of Man over 80 times in the Gospels. Now, what does that mean? Well, in Matthew 16:27, Mark 14:62, and Luke 21:27, Jesus connects the Son of Man to this magnificent figure in Daniel 7. This figure has qualities that Jews would understand to be qualities of divinity, coming with the clouds of heaven, given glory, authority, sovereign power, and worship by all peoples of every kind. Before I wrap up, let's take a quick look at two objections. First objection, if Jesus really was God, why wasn't he even more explicit about it? Why didn't Jesus just run around telling people, "I'm God"? Now that's a fair question. For one, it's a matter of tact, right? You don't want to overwhelm the people. But also, reading the Bible, you'll notice the more explicit Jesus was about himself, the more danger he put his life into. He had a ministry other than just letting people know he's God. But to make yourself God was considered blasphemy, punishable by death. We've seen this already, and so Jesus spoke about himself in more subtle ways. Second objection, what about the verses which make Jesus seem limited? For instance, he gets tired, he gets hungry, he gets thirsty, he seems powerless in certain situations, nor does he seem to know everything as God would. Put simply, these examples show Jesus in his humanity. Philippians 2:5-8 helps to clarify what's going on here. Though he was God, he gave up his divine privileges. He took the humble position of a slave and was born a human being. This passage tells us that somehow or another, Jesus set aside many of his abilities as God. It cost him dearly, even his own life. But he did this so that he could save us from our sin and become a realistic model for us to follow, while we wait for the blessed hope, the appearing of the glory of our great God and Savior, Jesus Christ.
Given everything we have looked at, it really sounds like Jesus saw himself as more than just a prophet, more than just a moral teacher, more than a revolutionary or a spiritual guru. Jesus claimed to be God. It's no surprise then that his followers also claim that Jesus was God. You see this on the lips of John, Paul, Peter, Thomas, Matthew, the author of Hebrews, and across all of church history. This is why the argument from C.S. Lewis stands. His famous words from the book Mere Christianity, when he says, "I am trying here to prevent anyone saying the really foolish thing that people often say about him. I'm ready to accept Jesus as a great moral teacher, but I don't accept his claim to be God." That is the one thing we must not say. A man who is merely a man and said the sort of things Jesus said would not be a great moral teacher. He would either be a lunatic on the level with the man who says that he is a poached egg, or else he would be the devil of hell. You must make your choice. Either this man was and is the Son of God, or else a madman or something worse. You can shut him up for a fool, you can spit at him and kill him as a demon, or you can fall at his feet and call him Lord and God. But let us not come with any patronizing nonsense about his being a great human teacher. He has not left that open to us. He did not intend to. Guys, I hope that was helpful. Thanks for watching.